Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and my head is out of the frame. So sharpening freehand is kind of a skill that you have to learn. It makes everything so much faster to just be able to find it, pick the bevel, and sharpen away, and then go through the grits, and you end up with a really nice clean edge. And it's really that simple to sharpen a blade. But I've had a lot of people recently asking me then, you know, it's not that difficult to do it with something wide like a 3/4 inch or a 1 inch chisel. But what if you're using something thinner like an 8mm or a 1/4 inch chisel, or even something smaller if you have an 1/8 inch chisel? They tend to get a bit of a bevel. And you can see on this one, it's not quite straight, it's higher on this point. And part of that's because I actually dropped it and this whole side has been bent in and chipped up. So I need to resharpen this tiny little 1/4 inch chisel. So one of the things I like to teach is when sharpening it, don't have the chisel in line with the stone so that you're running up and down the stone this way. The problem with that is that it becomes very easy to rock this up and down, and you'll slowly get a rounded edge on your chisel, which makes it harder and harder to sharpen because then you're not actually hitting the very tip of it. So I like to tell people is go at about a 45-degree angle or even a little bit more, and that way when you're going up and down the stone, the chisel is actually going, lengthwise, you're going across the chisel. So when you're sliding, there's less tendency to rock it as much because your movement is this way. It's very easy to lock your arm. Whereas when you're doing this way, it's very easy to roll your arm. So going across the chisel makes it a lot easier to get a nice clean edge. The problem is when you go to something smaller, suddenly your sharpening edge is longer this way, so it becomes easier to hold the bevel in line with the stone, whereas if you get used to doing it this way, it becomes very easy to then camber the iron this way. So that's why I like to tell people, for the smaller stones, it's good to learn to be able to come back in like this and hold that bevel down. I like to get as many fingers close to the tip as possible and then sharpen this way, and being very, very careful not to let my arm raise and lower. I'm locking everything from the ankles up, so I'm moving at the ankle, and I'm kind of swaying at the ankle. You can see how I kind of lift up with my back heel so that everything is locked in place, and the only movement is my heel and my toe as I let that lift me forward. Everything else then stays locked from one end to the other. So to put that into practice, I'm going to come back here to the coarse stone, and I'm going to feel that bevel and find out exactly where that angle is. I'm going to put my two fingers as close to the end. I'm not going to let them slide off the end. If I let them slide off the end, eventually I'm going to be sanding down my tip, or the tip of the chisel will actually be cutting off thin slices as I go. And I've had a couple times where I've gotten them too close to the tip and suddenly there's all this red stuff on here. It looks like my stone is rusting. Why is my stone? Oh no, it's my finger. So I'm going to find that bevel, put my fingers down close to the tip, and then rock on my heel. And I'm going to keep grinding until I see those scratch marks running all the way across the front. Now, one of the common problems that a lot of people have with the smaller one is that it tends to not be an even cut all the way across, and it tends to go out of square with the side. So you start getting this skewed chisel. And there's two common things that people have with that. Number one, if you're going at an angle, your trailing edge will have more pressure on it because you're pushing behind, and so you have to have a tendency to kind of roll the chisel up. On a larger chisel, to make it a little bit easier. It's as if when you're grinding into it, you're rolling it up, and I'm exaggerating heavily, but you can see how you'd be grinding more on the trailing edge as you push it away because you'd be lifting it up. Whereas if you're keeping it straight, then more of your pressure is going to be even all the way across the tip. And so that tends to be the big difference here. But in this case, you may end up finding out that you are still putting more pressure because your fingers are pointing to one side. You may find yourself putting more pressure on that side as you're grinding. So it's one of those things you just have to be conscious about. Whichever side you want to take off more, you want to be putting more pressure on that side of the chisel. So if you find yourself beveling more on the corner away from you, what you can do is kind of bring your fingers back a little bit and let them ride more on the side that's closer to you so that you're grinding more on that, you're putting more weight on that side. So basically to do this, I'm just going to go through the grits as normal, swinging at my ankle. And I'll see how that goes. And I'm looking for scratches going all the way across that are nice and even. Then we'll go up to the next stone. And I'll leave links to all of these stones below. I also have a video on making this sharpening plate, which makes it a lot easier. I kind of like this design. But I'm just going to be going through this, looking for new scratches, and you'll notice that the scratches become very different. Sometimes people might want to have a different orientation as they go all the way across the plate, but I like to just see these leave very different scratches from what these leave. And then I'm going to come over here to the last stone, and these don't actually leave scratches as much as it's more of like a buff mark. So it tends to be a little bit more matte. So I'm just going to go through this one, and I'm looking for those scratches to be all the way across. Yep. And yes, across has a T in it. So I'm going to finish this one up, and then come on here to the strop, do a good bit of work on that. Now on this one, because I put a good bit of work onto it off camera, to get rid of the nick in it from dropping it, I have to come back here because I have a heavy burr. Most of the time I'll take the burr off completely on the strop, but in this case just had to do one more course on there, and I'll go back and forth on the back, on the face, on the back, on the face, until that burr falls off, and then we'll have a really nice clean chisel. So there you have it. As long as you're thinking about where are you putting the pressure on the blade, are you twisting it, are you putting more pressure on one side or the other, are you moving from the ankle, is your arm actually going in an arc? Those are a few things you just need to be thinking through to make sure you're getting a nice, clean, smooth surface on there. So it's a fairly simple thing once you break it down and think about the mechanics. What is your body doing to influence the edge on there? I hope you like this. If it did help you, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear about that. I do want to say thank you to the patrons on Patreon. You guys are the reason why I can keep putting out videos like this. If you'd like to find out more about that or help out with Patreon, you can do so right down there. Also, if you want to subscribe or see some more behind the scenes footage, you can do that as well. Until next time, have a wonderful day.